Welcome to the Laverne Church of the Brethren's weekly audio message. Here at the Laverne Church of the Brethren, we create a Christian community called by Christ to be inclusive, caring, and peace-minded. We affirm that people of any race, ethnic identity, gender identity, sexual orientation, ability, age, economic status, faith tradition, or life situation are welcome in our congregation. We believe in compassionate service, stewardship of creation, respect for diversity, and nonviolent reconciliation for differences among all people, nations, and faith traditions. We claim no creed but the New Testament as exemplified by the life of Christ. We strive to follow the way of Jesus. And through these efforts, we seek to grow ever closer to the mind and heart of God. And now let us ground ourselves as we enter into today's message. Our second reading comes from the Baha'i tradition, from the Baha'u'llah. Those virtues that befit God's dignity are forbearance, mercy, compassion, and loving kindness toward all the peoples and kindred of the earth.
You might be familiar with a series of paperback books called Chicken Soup for the Soul. Anybody ever read one of those, right? Yeah. I want to read you a story from one called Chicken Soup for the Soul of America, and the title of the article is the same as the sermon title, Standing in Solidarity. It was written in 2001 by our own Shirley Boyer, whose husband Chuck Boyer was the senior pastor of this church for 14 years. These are her words. 5 miles from our home in Laverne, California, are two Muslim schools that I did not realize were there until the days following the terrorist attacks in September. Then came that day, September 11, 2001. That changed every American's life in some way. It is interesting to notice that the 9/11 in its dateline is the emergency telephone number throughout our country. It is a reminder of how so many felt helpless and threatened during the tragedy. It became a time to watch the unbelievable scenes on the television news. Later, a question came to my mind. What could I ever do to help ease the pain in this tough situation? One answer came very unexpectedly. My husband, Chuck, a pastor in the Church of the Brethren, was invited by a Muslim acquaintance to an interfaith meeting on the Friday following the attacks. There, one idea presented was to give support to the Muslim schools, which had closed upon hearing the news of the terrorist attacks. A few days later, a phone call came asking us to go stand in front of these schools when they reopened. All we were expected to do was to be a presence there, to show our support for the Muslims as human beings and fellow Americans, not as terrorists. It sounded simple enough. With some uncertainty, I arrived at the gated school that morning, the morning it reopened, September 19. Several other brethren, as well as people from other denominations, came. Our waving, smiling, and greetings began to be returned to us immediately by the parents and teachers as they drove by the drop-off area. Many expressed their appreciation for us being there. As days passed, we were given donuts and flowers and letters of thanks from the students, a breakfast and a thank you luncheon where plaques were presented to the Laverne and Pomona Fellowship churches of the Brethren. These plaques state that we are united under the same God. We have become acquainted with these dear Muslims who are more like us than I could have imagined. Never have they tried to convert or terrify us. They've been very accepting of who we are. In fact, In fact, it was an amazing moment when one Muslim stated that some of them wanted to come to our worship service in Laverne. Her faith encouraged learning about other faiths, she reported. The day of October 14 was set for their visit, and 30 of these new Muslim friends were warmly greeted by our congregation. The following Monday, we heard that their attendance at our church had become a meaningful time to them. They sent a note of gratitude to the Laverne congregation. For us, a relationship with the Muslim community is just beginning. We have been invited to attend their worship service. We have scheduled a planning session to determine how we can work together. Out of tragedy has emerged a Christian-Muslim relationship that is exciting and fulfilling. Little did I dream of what blessings were in store for us from being just a presence at the Muslim City of Knowledge School, and little did I know how much our presence would mean to the teachers and students. A thank you note from a fifth grader said it all. Dear people, you make me feel safe. Without you, I wouldn't feel safe. I like how polite you are. With you, I won't feel suspicious. This is a thanks from my best friends and me. Love, Hassan. That is unique in the world. Just how uncommon it is indicated by the fact that that story made national headlines at the time. And many of you know that story. In fact, many of you probably participated in providing a presence there, either in 2001 or some years later when the action was repeated during another wave of anti-Islamic threats of violence. But I am retelling the story this morning for two reasons. First, there are some who are not aware of that history and that it stands for something central to who we are. I'm thinking especially of our young people and new members. Our young people need to know that we are a people who intend to take Jesus seriously and literally when he says to love our neighbors as ourselves. That when the Bible teaches that we are to administer true justice, show mercy and compassion to one another, that's what we intend to do. We're not going to just talk about it, we're going to do it because that's who we are. And we make no apologies for being a people of God's peace. I love the quote at the top of the bulletin by Jerry Zare in The Peacemaker's Path. We must stop demonizing others, he writes. It is easy and sometimes comforting to dehumanize a group of people we know little about. Once we demonize someone, we can justify our mistreatment of them. We build walls, physically and spiritually, to keep those people at bay, end quote. It's hard to deny that our country is more polarized than it has been in a long time, maybe since the Civil War. The Pew Research Center took a poll of U.S. adult citizens not too long ago and reported that partisan divisions over issues related to racial discrimination, immigration, international diplomacy, and domestic political issues have widened significantly over the past 20 years. And you probably didn't need a poll to tell you that. We need to find ways to talk to each other respectfully. We need people who will be champions for unity and peace. Loving our friends is easy. Loving the other, loving the adversary, will bring shalom. In his book, On the Brink of Everything, Parker Palmer says, loving God is a piece of cake compared to loving another human being. Charlie Brown said, I love mankind, it's just people I can't stand. The writer of the letter of 1 John understood that. saying, "No one has ever seen God, but if we love each other, God lives in us, and God's love is brought to full expression in us." Is that true? I think that's true. One July night, some years ago, the Jewish temple in Carmel, Indiana, and yes, that's how they say it there, Carmel, just like they say Peru, Terre Haute, Versailles, and Notre Dame. Anyway, this temple was spray painted with swastikas. The news of this act of hatred hit the media that weekend, and in 3 days, people were invited to come to the temple on the next Monday evening for a service of solidarity. There were over 1,000 people in attendance, and the Jewish community had not expected this response of solidarity and support. Rabbi Senro remarked in the service, "The people who vandalize our property, trying to instill fear into our community, instead wakened a giant of compassion and kindness." It was a powerful service, having people from different faith traditions speak words of unity and support for their Jewish brothers and sisters. That is the way it should be. This act of hatred generated 100 times more acts of love and unity between different faith traditions. There are some who will say, if you're someone who believes in interfaith cooperation, well, you're just for the amalgamation of all religions into one. You're a pantheist. You're an omnist. I had to look that one up. No. What I am, I suppose, is a sectarian ecumenist. I want to be the best brethren I can be, the best Christian, Anabaptist, and radical pietist. That's who I am. But I want others to be the best Methodist they can be, or the best Lutheran, or the best Catholic, or the best Buddhist, or Hindu, or Muslim that they can be. Is that asking too much? I hope we can do that for each other. I hope we can work together. We have, I think, right now, what I would call an interfaith peace camp, right? Yeah. And maybe we'll have an annual interfaith potluck someday. Or maybe we'll have an interfaith love feast. Wouldn't that be amazing? I don't know. We do have an interfaith peace walk that occurs every year. To be open to other traditions might mean that I can fathom that I don't have all of the truth all of the time. The founder of the Church of the Brethren, Alexander Mack, used to say that all the time. It might mean that I can learn something from somebody else who is not me. It might mean that I could discover that I could share something from my tradition with someone else. When our society and culture is into banning books and burning books, let us be a people open to the inclusion of people and ideas, discerning truth, not dismissing it. Maybe the church should offer a book study of so-called banned books. When our society and culture is into changing history, especially black history and Latinx history and Asian history, much of which has to do with the oppression of these people and also their significant contributions, let us be the church that offers the truth about the record. Maybe the church should offer a study of banned history. When our society and culture stands against what they consider to be woke ideas. Let us be a people who intend to be aware of systemic injustices and prejudices, especially those involving the treatment of ethnic, racial, or sexual minorities. I hope our sermons and spiritual life classes and life in general at the Laverne Church of the Brethren is never asleep and always woke to important issues of justice, freedom, and truth. I should give a shout out to Barbara Smythe, who is standing up for that issue right now with our local school board, and in a letter to them included the Supreme Court ruling in Island Trees Union Free School District versus Pico, New York, 1982, citing students' First Amendment rights, quote, "Local school boards may not remove books from school libraries simply because they dislike the ideas contained in those books," end quote. Good for you, Barbara. Maybe the church could find ways to stand behind her in that effort. When even the Supreme Court is making decisions this week that take away the rights of women and minorities and LGBTQ people, let us be a church that still regards these rights to be inalienable. Too much? Well, I'll be done in a couple of months. The scriptures of the Baha'i faith state, if you desire with all your heart friendship with every race on earth, your thought, spiritual and positive, will spread. It will become the desire of others, growing stronger and stronger until it reaches the minds of all people. Do not despair. Work steadily. Sincerity and love will conquer hate. How many seemingly impossible events are coming to pass in these days? Set your faces steadily toward the light of the world. Show love to all. Take courage. God never forsakes God's children who strive and work and pray. Let your hearts be filled with a strenuous desire that tranquility and harmony may encircle all the warring world. I can't do better than that. Amen.
We're so glad that you listened to the message today. If you're looking for an open and affirming, peace-loving, and justice-seeking congregation, consider visiting us for in-person worship on Sundays at 9:30 a.m. We'd love to meet you.